Hey, what's bussin', fellas? It's your boy TACHO here, and we back. We got some more Fire Emblem content, although not necessarily of the heroes variety. So, what we're gonna do today is a tier list of all of the Fire Emblem games ever released. We got all the main entries in here, we got all the spin-offs in here, like Warriors and TMS and all that good stuff. And we're just going to go ahead and place all of these wonderful games on this tier list that I made here. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go in order of release. And we're going to start, of course, with the granddaddy of them all. Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, the original on NES. I'm going to toss this in OK tier. Now, I have played this game once and only once. And this was a very long time ago. I don't remember too much about it. Man, when did I even play this? How many years ago was it? I would have played this in like 2007 or 2008-ish, somewhere around that time frame. I don't even remember if I was in high school when I played it. Like, that's how long ago this was that I played the fan translation of this. So I'm going to toss this in OK tier. Really, the only thing I remember about it is that Marth fights with no pants. Like, that's part of his attack animation. I remember also that Joggen's growths were awful, and also Bantu had like the worst growth rates ever. So yeah, a lot of like wonky stuff about it I remember, but not too much about the good stuff. So we're gonna put it in OK tier. Obviously, I had played FE7 first, like most Western players. So playing this was a trip, to say the least. But it was more for the novelty. I wanted to play this just to see where the story started, where the series got its footings on. Okay, next up we have Gaiden, the original FE2. Never played it, never had any reason to want to play it. From my understanding, it's literally just a Gaiden. Like, that's what this translates to in Japanese, is Gaiden is side story. So my interpretation of this game was that it was just a side story, a spin-off of FE1 in some way or form, and it wasn't important. So it just flew under my radar completely. Now, obviously, I understand that it's its own game, but back then I didn't, because I was just playing, like, whatever fan translations were available for me to play, that's what I was doing. And this one had one, but it didn't seem, like, too interesting. It didn't really pique my interest. Okay, we have FE3 up next. I have also played this game, but I've only played it one time. I don't remember much about it again either. Like, this would have been a long time ago when I played this. We're talking years and years ago, like over a decade ago that I played this. I do remember it was a little better than the first. It had, like, better animations. It was kind of more ironed out, but this would have been one of the later releases on NES as well, like one of the final releases before Super Nintendo came out. So I do remember it looked pretty good. That's about all I remember, though. I don't remember too much about it other than that. We're going to leave it in OK tier, though, because, again, I can't be too hard on the first two games. Well, first three. Okay, then we have FE4. This is a game that I hold very dear. This is this my favorite of the non-localized Fire Emblems? It might be. It's between this and FE6. Oh, man, that's going to be a race. But I'm going to toss this in amazing tier. This game is phenomenal. The story is second only to one, which we'll talk about in due time. But my God, this game, the story slaps. The characters slap. Sigurd is my second favorite lord ever. He is such a badass in this game, and cavalry units are so godly in this because the maps are so massive. So Sigurd just gets even better and better. And the time skip is pretty interesting. This was the first game to introduce child characters where you want to get your pairings correct so you can inherit Holy Blood for Part 2 and get the right weapons on the right characters and things like that. So it had a lot of, like, micromanaging in Part 1, and then in Part 2, you just get to kick so much ass with all those busted legendary weapons and things like that. So this game is phenomenal. The only thing that I don't like about it, though, is how long the chapters are. As I said before, FE7 was the first one that I played. I think anytime we need to do a comparison, we're going to go back to FE7 because of that. But, like, the chapters in this game, a single chapter here can be as long as like 4 or 5 chapters from FE7, which is very grueling to try to do in one sitting. So that's the only downside I have to say about this, but otherwise, I love this game so much. And also, the music is really good. I always like get hella hyped when I hear the Granval theme playing when I like start playing on chapter 1. So just very awesome stuff there. Okay, we have Thracia 776 up next. Yes, I'm going to call it Thracia, not Thracia, or Thracia, whatever. If you want to know why that is, read the katakana for the game in Japanese and tell me that doesn't say Thracia. Or, yeah, Thracia 776. That's literally the katakana. So don't come at me for my pronunciation. That's how we said it back in the day. All right, now I actually hate this game. Which is surprising considering how much I love FE4. But I'm not going to put it in I hate it tier. I'm going to put it in okay tier because it does lay a lot of foundation down. This game pretty much laid down the groundwork for all of the Game Boy Advance ones that we're about to talk about. So I have to give it its due credit. It also introduced a lot of different win conditions, like the run away, like escape, get to a certain point on the map, and then you escape, and things like that. So it wasn't just all about routing the enemies and like killing the boss or seize the throne or things like that. It was just, it had a lot of variety to it. I'll give it that much. But what I don't like about it, again, like the reason why I didn't like Gaiden at the time, I don't like this. It's basically just a side story of FE4 that takes place in between the time skip. So I don't know, man. I was very picky about story back then. This was when I actually still cared about story, when I was playing these games in the old days. Nowadays, I'm just more of a gameplay guy. I can't be bothered with story. But that's one of the reasons why I docked some points on this too. Also, the gameplay is very wonky. You get like the warp staff. You can skip entire chapters with that shit. Like, it's not very well balanced at all. And if you're a fan of gameplay, then I don't think this is one of the better ones from a gameplay standpoint. Now, that's a perfect way to segue into FE6, where I think this may be the most flawless Fire Emblem game ever released in terms of gameplay. It is so perfectly balanced. Like, you boot up FE6 hard, and it's difficult for me to pick a game that actually has a better difficulty setting than this, because it's very short and to the point, as it should be on a handheld game. Like, you think about Engage. Engage is another really gameplay-heavy centric game, but the chapters are brutal in Engage. It's very long. I didn't even realize the first time I was playing how much time I was spending on each chapter, playing on Lunatic Classic for the first time. Whereas this game, like, you play on FE6 hard, and yeah, it is difficult, but it's not, like, difficult to a degree where you're spending hours on one chapter. It's very perfectly balanced. You gotta make good use of the terrain, like getting into the tree tiles and the forest and things like that. Make sure you use the pillars and stuff to get your extra evade and all that. At the start of the game, I believe the brigands have like a 40 hit chance on Roy. So, like, even having weapon advantage is not going to get you very far in the early chapters unless you're abusing the terrain and stuff like that. So you got to use your brain quite a bit here. It is a very well-balanced strategy game, and the music just hits so hard, man. Every time I play that first chapter and Beyond the Open Skies hits, I love that theme so much. It gets you so hyped to play the rest of the game. Or Beyond the Distant Skies, that's Roy's theme. He may have the best theme out of all the lords, even though he himself is not necessarily the best lord. So yeah, I adore this. It's my favorite of the Game Boy Advance entries. Okay, next up we have FE7. This game has been talked about to death. What else is there to really say about it? It's very good. It's where a lot of us got our footing into Fire Emblem, because this was the first localized one. I guess I'll tell you guys a little story about how I ended up playing it. So I was over at my cousin's house, and he had the game on his Game Boy Advance. This was like right when it came out too. So my cousin was big into Smash Brothers. So like most people that played Smash Brothers, they were aware of Marth and Roy, but we weren't really aware of what game they were from, because up until then there was no Fire Emblem English release. So that's how my cousin had found out about this. So he bought the game actually very soon after it came out, and he had it on his Game Boy Advance. And I just went over to trade with him with like Pokemon Emerald. I was like, yo, trade me this Groudon for this Rayquaza real quick. And then he was like, hold on, let me show you this game that I just bought, Fire Emblem, right? So he was going to give it to me to play while I was at his house, but then my mom called right as I had booted the game up. I was about to play it, and then my mom called and told me I had to come home. So my cousin told me to just borrow the game and let me play it while I was there, and then bring it back the next time I see him. And I was so hooked, man. At the time, how old was I? I might have been in 7th grade, I think. I can't remember. I played it in like 2003, 2004, which was when it came out. I would have been in like middle school when I played this, and I was just hooked. I loved this game so much. What really sold me on it was the localization. The translation team did a phenomenal job. They played up the medieval themes so well. Like, the dialogue makes you really feel like you're in medieval times. Like, you just got teleported back to a Renaissance fair or something like that. The way the characters talk, they say phrases like well met, and they use a lot of Old English and Middle English, which is very cool to see. Not the same effort we see in the localizations nowadays, where I half expect characters to like start twerking and doing like modern day shit instead of like olden day shit that they should be doing. So just some points that I dock from modern Fire Emblem that don't keep up with the actual aesthetic and the immersion of being in medieval times. But yeah, this game, Hector Hard Mode, is probably the second most balanced hard mode besides FE6 Hard. Just hard to say any bad things about this. I guess if I had to nitpick one thing, it's the cast. I'm not the biggest fan of the cast in this game. I think a good segue for FE8 now. So Sacred Stones, I think, has my favorite cast of all the Game Boy Advance ones. I think FE6 has the best gameplay of all three, and then I think FE7 is the best of both worlds. It's like the most balanced. Because I'm not a big fan of the cast in FE6 at all. I think 7 is probably in the middle, and then 7 is in the middle. FE6 has the best gameplay, and this one has the worst gameplay. Oh my god, what did they do? Sacred Stones is so piss easy. I get bored a lot of the times when I'm playing this. It's impossible to die. Like, it's way too easy. Now, there are a lot of cool things about it, though. You're fighting a bunch of monster enemies, which is very interesting. They have that in Gaiden, too, but obviously I wasn't familiar with that until I played this, and we fight the monsters, which are cool. Also, the creature campaign at the end is really awesome, where even after you beat the game, unlike in these two, when you beat the game, that's basically it. In this, you can still explore the map and do a bunch of other things, like the Lagdo Ruins and the Tower of Volney. So it's got a lot of post-game content. It's pretty fun because of that. However, the main game itself is just a wash compared to these two. It's just way too easy, and there's not a lot of balance, not a lot of strategy involved. It's just your run-of-the-mill game, I guess you could say. All right, so next up we have the Tellius games. Oh my god, let's not even play. Don't play with me, man. These are the best ever. If you've played them, you already know. If you know, you know. Like, usually when we talk about Fire Emblem, 7 is what we go back to in terms of, like, using as a benchmark for the rest. A very heavily gameplay-focused game with a solid story. I guess the story in 7 was solid enough, but these took it to a whole new level, man. The story in the Tellius games are just probably the best story I've ever seen in a video game, period. Like, I say that, I'm not being facetious or, like, over-exaggerating. I'm not using hyperbole when I say that. I genuinely believe the story in these two is just the best I've ever seen in a video game. It's told so perfectly, all the plot twists. I can boot up Radiant Dawn anytime, and every single time I play it, I learn something new about the story. One of the characters, like maybe their backgrounds, like Soren's backstory. I remember when I first found out what that was, I was just blown away. Like how well, and how intricate it actually is. Like Sanaki's relationship to another character. I don't want to give too many spoilers. I mean, I guess Faye has already spoiled a lot, but you get what I'm trying to say. Like, the story in this is just so instrumental to how good these games actually are. And the gameplay elements are there. They're definitely not bad. More so in Path of Radiance, I would say the gameplay is very solid. Not so much in Radiant Dawn. A lot of people don't like that your characters get broken up between, like, parts. So, like, Part 1 has the Dawn Brigade. Part 2 has Alincia's team. Part 3 is the Grail Mercenaries. Part 4 is the endgame, like things like that. People did not like having your army split up in that way, and I can totally get why people are not a fan of that. Also, the support conversations in this game were very watered down. They actually don't even have supports. Like, Radiant Dawn did have them, or Path of Radiance had them, and they were, as you would expect, like in the Game Boy Advance ones, but not so much here. Instead, we got the base conversations, which was kind of like a way to get supports, but not really. Just to get the conversations in there. A lot of new characters in Radiant Dawn suffered because of that. They just don't have enough time to get fleshed out in terms of personality and things like that. So guys like Kai'Sa and Lyre and Volug and like all the newcomers in this game were not able to get their justice as they did in Path of Radiance. So it's not a flawless game. It's got a lot of issues. Gameplay-wise especially, it's not balanced whatsoever. So I still have to give it up, man. The story just carries so hard in these two. It's the perfect story. They're never going to top the story in Tellius, ever. And also the music. Oh my god, the music in Radiant Dawn. Radiant Dawn has the best soundtrack out of all the FE games. Okay, so next up we have Shadow Dragon. I hate this game. I almost quit Fire Emblem because of this game. Like, it's always so jarring to me that they go from Radiant Dawn, which I consider the best game, to Shadow Dragon, which I consider the worst game. It's no wonder Fire Emblem was in such deep trouble after, like, these two came out. I've never played the new Mystery Remake because of how bad Shadow Dragon was. I was just not having it. I was not about to play a sequel to this garbage. So, okay, instead of burying it, what good things can I say about Shadow Dragon? Let's see here. I guess the music is pretty good. It's not as good as Radiant Dawn, but the music in Shadow Dragon is actually pretty good. And the artwork from Daisuke Iizuka, I think, is pretty good too. I like the character portraits in this one. However, that's about all I can say that's good. The story is non-existent for the most part. I don't give a shit about the story in Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. Also, in order to unlock the guidance, you gotta let your own characters die, which is a huge no-no. Oh my god, no. We do not do that in Fire Emblem. When we play these games, the goal is to make it to the end without losing a single guy. That's not how it works in Shadow Dragon. They just bombard you with a bunch of useless nobodies that you're meant to kill off. And I really don't vibe with that. I don't like that. Also, the reclass system in this game was not there yet. It's completely unbalanced. It's a mess. You're able to reclass anybody at any time into anything you want. So that took away a lot of individuality of the characters. Like, in Sacred Stones, the branch promotions I thought were really cool because it had a limit that, like, you couldn't really abuse it that well, and it made sense in what kind of classes you could branch into. And also in FE7, where you only get one promotion, it kind of forces you to choose, like, between certain characters. Like, if you want a Sword Master, who are you going for? Corel? Are you going for Guy? Or yada, yada, yada? If you're going for an assassin, who do you want to go for? Jafar or Legault or Matthew? You kind of have to, like, choose your team based around that, like which actual class the character is and then what the growth rates are and things like that. That is non-existent in this game. You just use whatever has the best growths and then reclass them into whatever. So, yeah, this game is a mess. I don't like it whatsoever. Also, oh my god, the graphics are vomit in this game. Fuck that shit. Okay, so we have Awakening up next. Now, Awakening, thankfully, was able to save the series. I love Awakening very much, and a lot of it is in part to the DLC, because the DLC is literally just a love letter, a fan letter to all of the previous entries. They took a lot of the best features and put them in here, so child units from Jugdral were brought back in here and handled in a more interesting way, I think, with the time, like, traveling mechanic where Lucina and the children actually come back and fight alongside the Part 1 units. Imagine how nutty that would be if, like, Seliph and Zed and, like, all of the child units from this game came back and fought alongside Sigurd and co. That would have actually been baller, but not the case so much there. They handled it pretty interestingly here, and I also, like I said, the DLC was just so good. Every time I play Champions of Yore 3 and we hear Beyond the Distant Skies, it just gets me so pumped up. I can't sing enough praises to that song. So yeah, I love Awakening. It also has the pair-up feature, which is a new feature that they brought in with this. It wasn't quite there yet. It was pretty OP in Awakening. It was really overpowered, but I still kind of liked it. It was a good idea that they decided to put that in there. And as far as like gameplay is concerned, the difficulty is fine. I think Lunatic is a pretty good difficulty in this. However, Lunatic Plus is complete nonsense. Do not play Lunatic Plus. With the randomized enemy skills, it's just, it's a complete massacre, man. If too many enemies start off with Counter Plus in Lunatic Plus, you're just boned. You cannot win the map. So I think that's very bad design. That was not a good idea. However, Lunatic is very solid difficulty, very well balanced, and I think this game is pretty good because of it. The soundtrack is pretty solid. The artwork is okay. I wasn't a fan of the artwork when it came out, but I've grown on it, obviously. And the story in this, I'm not really the biggest fan of the story as a whole, honestly, but it's fine. It's serviceable. And as I said, a lot of it comes from the DLC, which I did like, so can't say anything bad about Awakening. It saved the day, kept Fire Emblem alive. Okay, we have Fire Emblem Fates up next. Again, another game that I've never played. I am thinking about playing this on the channel. A lot of people have told me to do a live stream where I'm playing this. And if I did do it, I would play Conquest. So let me know if you think I should play Fates on the channel. That's something I might not be opposed to. We'd probably just live stream it and maybe get some guests on with me just to like kill some time there. Okay, we got Fire Emblem Heroes up next. We're going to go ahead and place that in pretty good tier. So I feel like I would catch a beatdown if I had this in Amazing. I personally wouldn't even have it in Amazing myself, though. So we'll have it in pretty good. Obviously, it's a very cash-grabby game. The whole point is to milk money out of Fire Emblem fans, which it's done successfully considering it's been around for as long as it has. 7 years is nothing to sneeze at for a gacha. Like, gachas do not last that long. So it's got to be doing something right. Right? But based on how whiny the fan base is and how much we complain, I've, of course, been guilty of that as well. It's difficult for people to say, like, if you're looking from the outside in, it's hard to think if people realize we like the game or we hate it. It's like a love-hate relationship we have with this, but it is a fun game, and it does, of course, give us a lot of fan service of the series that we love, so I can't be too mad at it. I have a whole YouTube channel based on it, so obviously I like it. Okay, we got Shadows of Valentia up next. I think I'm going to put this one in pretty good as well. Now, the music is really good in this game. I love the music. I love all the remixes. Also, the story I thought was pretty solid. I like Alm and Celica quite a bit. The idea of having like a duo protagonist here and do it right as opposed to Ike and Micaiah in Radiant Dawn, where once you get Ike, he just like takes over and Micaiah becomes thrown to the side. I think these two did a pretty good job. Also, Alm is one of the more relatable lords, I would say. He, like, literally, Alm's story is that he just gets constricted into the army with a bunch of his bros from the village, and that's how the game starts. I think that's very relatable, and it makes it easy to click with the game, so that's cool. I also like the dungeon crawler mechanic that it had, where it's almost like SMT in a way, where you're going through the dungeons, and on the overworld, you see the creatures walking around, and you can engage them and fight them in battle. You get some bonuses if you attack first and things like that. Very similar to SMT. So, I like a lot of things about this game, but it's also not, like, an entry that's going to blow you away, I don't think. So, we've got it in pretty good. Also, the DLC was not as good as Awakening. Okay, we got TMS. I'm going to put that in Never Played. It's, to my knowledge, it's this Persona with Fire Emblem cosplay. If you played it, then let me know if I'm right or wrong about that. I may play that one day. I don't know. Okay, Fire Emblem Warriors 1. Now, this is pretty good. I actually do enjoy Fire Emblem Warriors 1 because it is exactly what it's advertised as, a Warriors game, unlike another game we're about to look at. So, yeah, this game has everything you would expect from a Warriors game. The remixes slap so hard. Oh, my God. The remixes in this game are just so good. I love the soundtrack here. Also, the graphics are pretty good. It's fun to just mow down a billion million enemies with one guy. So that is very fun. There's a lot of fan service as well with the victory animations are really cool. I wish they had that in this, in Three Hopes, but they didn't. And also, the characters get intro animations, too. It's really fun. Like, there's a lot of cool, like, very nice fan servicey touches. Also, the armor breaks, which can be very fan servicey, but for a different reason. So, yeah, this game is cool. I don't have any issues against it. It's a very grindy game. It's a button masher like all Warriors, but it's got a lot of things to do. It's got a lot of content, and it is fun for what it is. Now, the story sucks, but we're not grading a game like this on story. We're just grading this game on how fun it is, and also, what else is there to say? I guess that's about it, really. It's just a very fun game to play. All right, we got Three Houses up next. Oh, man. This one is where we're going to get very dicey. So, when I first played it, I would have had it here. As years have gone on, and as this has simmered in the pot, I feel like we've been cooking on this too long. I may have it down here now at this point, because just the amount of times that Heroes just goes into Three Houses, like uses them for banners and things. I am just so burnt out on Three Houses. Can I put it in I hate it? I don't know, man. That's probably not fair. I'm just going to go with what I felt when I played it the first time, which was that no, probably pretty good. Yeah, because the first time I played it, I played Crimson Flower. That was my first route and still my only route. God forbid I ever go back and play another one of these godforsaken routes. But yeah, I enjoyed it because it was very different. And that's kind of what I was looking for at the time. I didn't want another story that was trying too hard to outdo Radiant Dawn and then failing, like in Birthright and Conquest. I feel like, from what I've heard, they were trying too hard with the story, and that ended up backfiring on them. Whereas here, they tried really hard with the story, but I wanted something different, and I got it with Crimson Flower, where you don't even know if you're the good guys in Crimson Flower. So that kind of helped boost my like for the game a little bit there. I like the gray area with Edelgard. However, it's just such a slog to play. It's way too dialogue heavy. There's way too much talking. There's a lot of micromanaging because you got to go around the monastery doing like all the daily tasks, talk to everybody. You got to do the training. You got to do the fishing and like all that bullshit. I ain't got time for all that. Like, what was wrong with going from map to map, chapter to chapter, and just doing the game that way, like in a linear fashion? It's a strategy game, man. It's not a professor school sim, right? So I don't know. You're either gonna love it or hate it with this one, but it's so far out and different from the norm of other Fire Emblem games that I can see the strengths, but then also all the weaknesses are there. And again, I can't play any of the other routes because I just get bored because of all the dialogue. It's just a bombardment of text. So, yeah, maybe one day I'll play the other routes and get a complete picture of the story in this game, but I don't know. This one takes it out of me. Also, it's not balanced either. The gameplay is not balanced at all, man. Just make everyone a Wyvern Lord and you're good. Okay, next up we have Fire Emblem Three Hopes, which I'm going to put in... Should I have this in I hate it? I don't actually hate it, but I don't think it's particularly good. The first Warriors was way better. Now, this is not a Warriors game. This should have just been called Fire Emblem Three Hopes and erase Warriors entirely from the title. You don't get any of the fan service and goodness from Warriors games as you usually do. Now, Shez is a cool character. We all like Shez. But outside of that, the story was very bad. People had high hopes for the story in this after Three Houses. And the story in this was just not it. Like, this was not what we were looking for. So they kind of fell flat there. They advertised this as a, I don't know if prequel is the right word, but like a side story, like in between the time skip of Three Houses. This is what's supposed to be this game. And if that's the case, like, they could keep it, man. We were not at all interested in what they had to tell in this game. So, I don't know, man. They did not do a good job here. It's not a Warriors game. It's just Three Houses with Warriors gameplay. A lot of micromanaging, again, that I don't like. So, it's a slog to play this. It's not fun. I'll have it in okay because I enjoyed it a little bit, but Not as much as the first Warriors game. They were missing like all the fun stuff of Warriors games that would have made me like it. And then finally, we got Fire Emblem Engage. This is going in amazing tier. Yes, I'm one of the few people that actually loves this game, and I think that's because I played it without the DLC. I played Lunatic Classic without the DLC for my first run, and it just took me back to the olden days where you actually had to think and use strategy like in 6 and 7. The gameplay in this is phenomenal, man. I can't even stress it enough. This is the peak of Fire Emblem gameplay. The only problem is that it's too long. I didn't realize it the first time I was playing, but I was spending like 2 to 3 hours a chapter at some points, like towards the ending chapters, like with how many reinforcements spawn and how much like you got to look at like everything. You got to check all the enemies' weapons and their stats and all that. It's a very demanding and taxing game to play, but it is Fire Emblem strategy in all its glory. A lot of the new mechanics just hit so hard. Like the bond rings, the emblem rings were handled so perfectly. I would actually love it if that feature came back in the future. Like they just did it so good here, and it's such a good feature because, again, like in Awakening, it's such a nod to all the older entries with all of the previous lords coming back in some way or form. I really like that. Now, where this game falls flat, of course, is the story. But I would classify the story in this game as being so bad that it's good. Like, where it's self-aware, it knows that it's just literally a generic anime story. But it's also kind of poking fun of that a little. It's so over the top and ridiculous that it's hard not to kind of like laugh along as you're watching. So I don't think the story is as bad as people say. It's not good, but at least I was entertained in some way or form. So there is definitely that. There's also some pretty cool plot twists going on. Well, more so the one in chapter 10 and 9, where the thing happens. You know what thing I'm talking about, and it affects you for the rest of the game. So yeah, that was a really cool twist that happened there. What else do I want to say about it, Engage? What really got me stopping playing this was the lack of post-game content. After you beat the game, that's basically it. Like, you can grind Tempest Trials if you want, but what is even the point after you've beaten the game and you've already beaten the final boss? Like, you don't need to upgrade your regalia weapons anymore at that point. So this game would have did well with an actual post-game content that you could have done, but like maybe some trial maps or something like that. Something along the lines of like the post-game in FE6, I guess, or like Radiant or Path of Radiance with the trial maps would have been cool. But it is what it is. So there you guys go. I think this looks fine to me. The only game I really hate is Shadow Dragon. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. This is your boy Tacho signing out. Let me know what your favorite Fire Emblem game is of all time. For me, it's the Tellius 2-pair. So I will catch you guys again on the flip side. So hope y'all enjoyed it, and bye-bye.